Everyone, welcome back to Alfred's Basic Adult Piano Course, Lesson Book Level 1. This video is Lesson 56. We're going to cover page 63 in the book today, the song Joy to the World, which many of you may know, this is a very popular Christmas tune. And the previous lesson, 55 on page 62, covered the C major scale. And this piece actually uses a little bit of the C major scale. So let's review just a little bit of the C major scale in, let's start with the right hand first. So we're going to start with a right hand thumb on middle C. And when you play the scale, remember it's more than just the notes, it's the fingering. And the fingering allows us to play those notes evenly and smoothly. So when you're doing the C major scale in the right hand, it's going to be 1 on C, 2 on D, 3 on E. The important note is the F, because that's where you want to cross your thumb under to F. And then once you're there, you're good to go all the way up to C. Now when you come back down, you're going to go all the way back down to your F, your thumb on F. So just walk on down without any finger changes. Here's where you're going to cross 3 on E. And then that puts 2 on D, and it ends with thumb on C. So to ensure that we play it smoothly and accurately, that we start and end with our thumb on middle C, get to our pinky on C, those two crossing under crossovers, well, cross under and over, is really important. So once again, starting on middle C, C, D, E, cross your thumb under to F, and then you're good all the way up to C. Coming back down, B, A, G, thumb on F, cross to 3. Some people get confused. They think maybe it's 2, maybe it's 4, but it's 3. Because 3 means we end up with thumb on middle C. In your left hand, we're going to start on middle C actually with the scale, and we're going to go down. We're going to go backwards. So this is a little bit different. In the left hand, you actually cross when you get to G, but it's still after your third finger. Like the right hand, you did 1, 2, 3, and then you cross. Same thing here. So your thumb comes on G, and then you finish it up all the way down to C. Coming back up, all the way up until your thumb's on G, then you're going to cross 3 on A, and then 2 on B, and thumb on C. Okay? So, Joy to the World. Before we begin, there's a new dynamic sign. So remember, dynamics are volume. You've learned about forte, which means, to play very loud. Well, loud actually, because our new sign tells us to play very loud. Fortissimo, 2 Fs. Some people even call it double forte. I tend to just say double forte. But either way, fortissimo is probably the more accurate term. Very loud. So basically louder than forte. And you're thinking, goodness, I played forte as loud as I can. How do I play even louder? So here's the thing about dynamics. If you can't play any louder, for example, if you're doing a double forte, make the forte a little bit softer. Okay, so if we're looking at Joy to the World at the very beginning, it says forte. And you might be thinking, goodness, I'm trying to play my forte as loud as I can. How am I going to play double forte on the second line, second measure, even louder? So play, if you can only play the double forte maybe at what you consider forte, make your forte mezzo forte. Back down a little bit. Okay? It's really about hearing the volume differences. You still want it all to be loud, and ideally, yes, we want loud and very loud. But that's a little trick you can still get by with. Make your forte a little quieter so you still have room to grow. Okay? So we'll get to that in just a little bit. But we're going to start with the basics. We're going to start with the notes. And I'm going to start with the left hand. One reason is because the piece starts with the left hand. The other reason is it's a C major scale. Let me play you the first 4 measures of the beginning of Joy to the World, and I won't play it in rhythm. I'm just going to play the notes. That's a C major scale, fingering and all. What makes this a little more challenging, of course, is we got to implement these rhythms. We're in 4/4 time, 4 beats per measure. Notice there is an eighth note in our first measure. So if there are eighth notes, we're going to count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So I'm going to really slow this down for accuracy. This is actually a fast piece. But for accuracy right now and for fingering, because this is going to get a little tricky because of the rhythms. So first off, we've got middle C, 2 counts, 1 and 2 and. Then on beat 3, we have a dotted quarter note, B, 3 and 4. And then the A is on the and then quickly you've got to get to beat 1. Now what makes that difficult is that's where the cross under is. So my cross under has to happen very quickly. So you're going to have to practice going from the 3 on A to the thumb on G. So let's do that again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. So that is one reason why we want to go slow. That little cross under is a little tricky. And eventually it's going to go a lot faster. But if you have to go even slower than what I played it at, please do. Whatever. You may even have to take it out of rhythm first. Just review your scale. Make sure your fingering's good. The fingering is a must. It's vital to play any scale with good fingering. Otherwise, it won't be accurate, it won't be smooth, and the list goes on and on. Now, once you get to the thumb on G, you get a little break in the second measure because that's 3 counts, a dotted half note. So 1 and 2 and 3 and. Beat 4 is the F with your second finger, 4 and. The next measure you have an E for 2 counts, 1 and 2 and then a D for 3 and 4 and the next measure, lastly, you have C, dotted half note, 3 counts. Going on in the left hand, we have a rest on beat 4 in that measure. In the last measure, your second finger should still be on F. And if it's not, somewhere you did an unnecessary shift. Because going back to the beginning, right here on F, that's my second finger. So keep it there, because when I go to the last measure, I'm going to need it there for that F. So that F is a dotted half note, 3 counts, 1 and 2 and 3 and then you're going to hit it again on 4 and. On the second line, add a G to that F. You've got an F and a G. Remember, visually, when you look at a staff and you see 2 notes that are diagonal, then they are a second apart. Everything else that we see is always going to be stacked vertically, but if it's diagonal, it's always a second. In this case, an F and a G. So it's 3 counts, dotted half note, quarter note on beat 4, and then the second measure, just move to your third finger on E, keep the thumb on G because we have E and G. That is a dotted half note as well. There's a fermata above it. It looks like an eye. In fact, some musicians will call it a bird's eye. So the fermata, if you remember, you hold the note even longer than its given value. So even longer than 3 beats. How long? It's kind of up to the player. You kind of feel it with the music. Sometimes people just like to double it, so they give it 6 counts. Might be too long in this case. It's just something you kind of have to feel, but you do want to hold that longer. So remember, when you get there, that's also the double forte. Okay, so you're going to be really loud at that point, much louder than I'm playing it. Now the rest is on beat 4 in that measure, the quarter rest, but again, come in on that rest whenever you're ready. In fact, you don't really come in on the rest, you come in with your right hand at that point. But as far as left hand by itself goes, you're resting until you get to the last note in the 4th measure. Now that is a middle C, thumb on middle C. So notice where we left off, our thumb is on G. At some point there, you're gonna have to bring that thumb up to middle C. Now you might even wait and just do it when you play it. If you're quick enough, you gotta be ready for that C right on beat 4. Okay, so that, we'll pick it up right there on 4, and. Now in the next measure, you can hit C again. And these are all quarter notes. So 1, and now we're going down the scale to B, A. And remember, if we're going down the scale, we're crossing under. Thumb comes under the G. So that's why there's a thumb on that G at the end of that line. Now in the third line, we hit the G again. It's a dotted quarter note. 1 and 2, and then the F is on and. And then we have an E on beat 3. Rest on beat 4. So those couple measures right there at the end of the second line, that's a C scale. Not all the way down to C down here, but almost. Almost. And you have some repeated notes like middle C. And the G. And of course the rhythms. Okay? So on the third line, first measure, you rest on beat 4, you have a quarter rest, and then you have a C chord on measure 2. It's a dotted half note, so 3 counts. 1 and 2 and 3 and rest on beat 4. Next measure, C chord, 3 quarter notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and rest on beat 4. The last measure on this line, that's a G7 chord. So remember, from a C chord to a G7, you're going to bring your pinky down to B. Your second finger should be over F, and you just played the G in the C chord. So B, F, and G is your G7 chord. You're going to hold that for 3 counts and rest on beat 4. On the bottom line, same chord, quarter notes. Rest on beat 4. And then the second measure, C chord, dotted half note, 3 counts. So there's a little bit of a pattern here because you're resting once again on beat 4. And the next measure, C chord again, 3 counts. Now there's no rest on beat 4. Instead, your second finger plays F. And then the second to last measure, you got thumb on G for 2 counts. G7 chord for 2 counts. And lastly, the C chord. And that's a whole note there at the very end, 4 counts. So that is our left hand. So as you're learning your left hand, well, and your right hand, and you start putting in the rhythm, go slow, but remember to count 1 and 2 and, because of our eighth notes. Plus, you'll want to go slow as you're learning some of these cross unders, because when it goes faster, you see how fast you got to do that. And this is a pretty fast piece. If you're familiar with this piece, it's not a slow piece. So it'll take some time to work that up. I'm going to go through now and play just the left hand. I'm going to give a count off. I won't count the whole time, but I may count during some of these rests so we don't lose track of where we're at, because there's a lot of rests in the left hand on the second line. All right, so remember, it's the middle C position for your left hand. Okay, so here's the count off. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Rest. 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then I have my fermata, so I might just sit on it for a little bit. But going on, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 So wherever there was a rest on beat 4 in the left hand, I purposely brought my hand off the piano just so that you could see that that's where you rest. And I want to make that rest very clear. Now, I don't necessarily want you to leave the piano like I did, because you could potentially lose your spot when you go back down. But again, I was just making it clear that you need to hear where those rests are, and we do need to implement those rests. They're very important. All right, so that covers our left hand. Now, our right hand doesn't even come in until the end of the top line. It's beat 4 on the 4th measure. The right hand is actually in the G position. So that means your thumb's on G. That's your starting note. So let's look at these notes, do a little bit of counting. So in that measure, you've got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and in the next measure, 2 on A. That's a dotted half note, so 3 counts. And then a quarter note on beat 4. Second line, 3rd finger on B. That is a dotted half note, so that's 3 counts. Hit that B again on beat 4. And then lastly, your 4th finger should be on C. That C also has a fermata. So both hands right there will be holding this chord longer than 3 counts. That's also where the fortissimo is. And then when you get ready, the right hand resumes, the left hand rests. So the right hand plays on beat 4. And then you hit that C again in the next measure. And these are all quarter notes going down to B, A, G. Next measure, hit the G again. The dotted quarter notes. So that would be 1 and 2. And the F comes in there. And then quickly you have a crossover, 3rd finger to E. So this is actually the C major scale. But you've got these rhythms in there. This may seem a little familiar because the left hand is going to echo this right after, which we already did the left hand. So that's why it may seem similar, because it is. So again, back to the second line, second measure, beat 4. 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and off on 4. So you're going to want to practice that because of the quick crossover from the F to the E. You want to stay right there with your 3rd finger on E, because if you look ahead, the next place that the right hand plays is on the 3rd line. First measure, beat 4. It's the same note, it's the same finger, 3 on E. So stay right there. Don't move when the left hand plays. Try to stay right there. So picking it up right there, 3rd line, first measure, beat 4. You got a bunch of E's in a row here. You got 4 and then the next measure, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. 2 eighth notes there on 4 and. That's another E on beat 4, F on and. That puts 5th finger on G for 3 counts. And then on beat 4 in that measure, you have F and E. 4 and then back to D on the last measure. So you got 3 quarter note Ds, 1 and 2 and 3 and then 2 eighth notes, D and E, 4 and then you have a dotted half note F on the bottom line. That's 3 counts. Then on beat 4 of that measure, you've got E, D, 2 eighth notes. So 4 and 1 and. Now we have an octave jump. So 1 and middle C up to this C. If you can't stretch it, that's okay. Literally make the jump. And this is on beats 2 and 3 and. And that should put your 3rd finger here on A, which is on beat 4. And the next measure, you have 2nd finger on G, 2, second finger. The counting is 1 and 2 because it's a dotted quarter note. Thumb goes to F, and you have that crossover again. So elements of the scale right there. So you're going to make sure that that's quick enough. And then beat 4 is 4th finger on F. And then the last 2 measures, E for 2 counts, D for 2 counts, and middle C for 4 counts. So I'm going to go through now and play the right hand. I'm going to bypass the beginning, all those rests, and just pick it up where the right hand comes in. Again, I'll do a count off. I'll throw in some counting if needed throughout, but I'm not going to count the entire time. So remember, this is a thumb on G. It comes in on beat 4, and we're going to start right on that measure 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Here's our fermato, so we'll just sit on that for a bit. Notice my 4th finger's on C. I'm going to jump over to my 5th finger on C and pick it up on beat 4. 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and rest on 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 3 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. All right, now we're going to put the hands together. Sometimes they're together, sometimes they're not, because at the very beginning, our left hand plays first by itself. Have your right hand ready to go. So when you start the piece, left hand, thumb on middle C, right hand, thumb on G. So the left hand again plays by itself at the beginning. When you get to this measure here, measure 4, remember it plays the half note for 3 counts. You're going to be off on beat 4, but you're going to be on that G in the right hand. Now the last measure is the first time hands play together. F in the left hand, A in the right hand. Different notes, but it's the same fingering. It's the 2 finger in both hands, so that feels pretty good. You play those notes again on beat 4. On the second line, remember in the left hand, F and G, 2 and 1, 3rd finger B in the right hand. Play it again on beat 4, and then the next measure should have a 4 on C in the right hand, 3 on E, and thumb on G in the left hand. This is our fermata. And then we're going to switch to 5 in the right hand on C on beat 4. And you'll rest in the left hand at that point. And then you're going to have to jump and make sure that thumb is on middle C right on beat 4. You can either do it like I did, right on beat 4, or jump ahead of time. In other words, I'm here on my fermata chord. I'm going to continue in my right hand and watch my left hand. I might bring it over in the process. If that's easier, do that. But either way, you got to be ready right there on beat 4. And be off of that E on beat 4. So picking it up right there with the left hand. Now, it's so tempting, I think, on the end of the second line to move that right hand out of the way, to come up here. Your right hand, when it crosses to that 3 on E, what happens is it puts your thumb down here on middle C. Well, your left hand is playing on middle C at the end of that 4th measure. And so naturally, you want your right hand to let that left hand play so it moves. But I would try to leave the 3rd finger on E, because remember, when we get down to the 3rd line, you're going to want that 3rd finger on E in the right hand. So either get used to the idea of the thumb in the left hand playing and just bring your right hand thumb up, let that left hand go underneath, or you could move it over briefly and then kind of swing it back. So you have some options there, but try to avoid shifting the hand because you want that third finger to remain on the E. Okay, so I'm going to pick it up on the last measure, second line. Now right here, first measure, third line, beat 4, rest in the left hand, but you're down on that E in the right hand. And the next measure, both hands play. When you get to the 8th notes, you're up. Now, it doesn't have to be up, up like I am, but you've got to rest. Don't hold the chord all the way through. You're supposed to rest. Let the 8th notes be a solo. The next measure, both hands play. Again, the 8th notes will be by themselves. Now be careful in this last measure because your left hand goes to the G7 chord. Once again, rest on beat 4. Stay on the G7 chord on the bottom line. And again, so there's a pattern here. Beat 4, you always rest in the left hand in this section. The right hand's always playing 8th notes. Now be careful here, you got to switch to the C chord. Rest again on beat 4, but you just have a quarter note in the right hand. Stay right there in the left hand because you're going back to the C chord. Now, beat 4 here, both hands are playing an F. So that's kind of cool. Different fingers, 4 and 2, but the same note. In the next measure, you're basically coming up one finger in the left hand to that G, down one finger to the E in the right hand. So you're going from here to here. And then G7 chord in the left hand, and then C chord. So a very busy last line. You're going to have to really work that out, really practice that hands together, going slowly, make sure everything's lined up vertically. So that covers the notes, the rhythm. The last thing are the dynamics, and there's some pedaling too. The pedaling is a little interesting in this piece. The first time we have a pedal marking is the second line, second measure on that fermata chord. So you're right here. Now, I think the reason for the pedal is so that your right hand can switch to 5 on C and it's still holding down the previous C that you played. You know, if I don't have pedal and I go to that C, there's a break, and maybe that's okay, but this author, arranger, probably said, hey, I don't want there to be a break. So switch, and as soon as you get that C, come off the pedal. So that might be why. Otherwise, I don't see a reason for it at all. The next time you have pedal is the third line, third measure, where the left hand is playing these quarter note chords. You have the same thing on the first measure of the bottom line. And I think the only reason for that pedal there is to keep it a little bit smoother. Because without pedal, you know, that can get a little choppy, no matter how carefully you try to play it. But if you pedal, you see it connects it more. Same thing here. Whoops. So it adds a little bit of smoothness. Now, why is there a pedal on the very last measure? That is the question. I held it for 4 counts. I didn't use pedal. The only thing I could see is you could be like, okay, I don't need my hands anymore, and then lift it. But honestly, if you don't use pedal at the end there, just as long as you hold it down for 4 counts, you're good. So just a little bit of sparse pedaling in here. And remember, even though you're not using pedal throughout the piece, have your foot ready to go. So you need to have your foot just to the right of your sustain pedal, your damper pedal, which is the one on the far right if you have more than one pedal. If you're on a keyboard, you may just have one pedal. All right, now I'm gonna play the whole piece through. Oh, one more thing, dynamics. So you're gonna start forte. We talked about the double forte, the fortissimo. That's the only spot it happens in the whole piece, is right on that chord. I want that to be very, very, very loud. So there's a crescendo at the very last measure. Gradually get louder up into that fortissimo. Again, if you can't play louder than a forte, start the piece at mezzo forte. It'll still work. The rule is, until there's another dynamic sign, you stay at the volume. So even though I said that's the only spot that was a fortissimo, the next dynamic change doesn't occur till the first measure of the third line. So stay at that fortissimo until you get to the third line, first measure, beat 4, then it dips down in volume to a mezzo forte. Bottom line, beat 4 first measure, you're back up to a forte. There is not much pedaling, but notice there's a lot of slurs. So it's not a choppy piece, it's a very smooth piece. So you want to connect all that. You don't want to do this. You don't want to chop it up. All right, so I'm going to play the whole thing one time through. I'm not going to play it too fast. Like I said, it can be a fast piece, but I'm still going to play it on the slower side. I'll give a count off, and then I'm just going to play. So get my hand position. Make sure my foot is next to the pedal, and I'm ready to go. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... So when you put all of this together, it's really challenging. When you have that pedal occasionally going in and out, and when you have these dynamic signs and you're trying to play things smooth, and you've got all those quarter rests in your left hand, and you're thinking about the fingering because of the scale, the crossovers and all. It's a lot. So this is going to be a tough piece to work out because it's a faster piece too. Even at that tempo I played, it's a challenge. So this one may take a while, and that's okay. We're just getting to that point where things are getting more and more difficult. If you have any questions at all, please leave the questions in the comments section below, and I will do my best to get back to you in a timely manner. I wish you all the best, and it's been a little while. Actually, it's been 6 months already since the previous lesson, but I'm back on track. And I'm looking forward to continuing these lessons. So I will see you next time in lesson 57.